Welcome everybody to SHPA's webinar on building resilience to manage stress. We're just waiting for a few more people to join and we'll get started right away. I might just start out while we're waiting for people to join us by introducing our speakers today, and they've kindly come into the Federal Secretariat and they're sitting with me. I have Guna. She's a psychologist with extensive experience in counselling and trauma management, debriefing and facilitating sessions, and she's a consulting and practicing psychologist, and she has a long-standing association with the Pharmacistical Support Service. She's provided training for volunteers at the service and has provided counselling for pharmacists after incidents such as hold-up, pharmacists who've made dispensing errors or who are distressed for other reasons. Guna also has extensive experience in providing career transition, career coaching, and as well as facilitating stress management workshops. Denis is with us as well. He's a psychologist. He provides a wide range of psychological services, including counselling, coaching, debriefing and facilitation. He provides counselling as part of career transition coaching for individuals who are experiencing anger or grief, low self-esteem, depression and anxiety as a result of having been retrenched. So in the past he's delivered workshops on stress management, and during the last couple of years he's facilitated sessions on improving communication in stressful conditions for staff in the emergency departments of hospitals. So I think you'll agree we've got some really high calibre speakers with us today. Okay, so just in relation to this presentation, Guna and Denis have no conflicts of interest. The learning objectives for today are really to identify the physical, emotional and behavioural signs of stress and the common causes of stress within the pharmacy profession. Guna and Denis will also talk about strategies to promote resilience and reduce the impact of stress, and they'll also talk about the role of the Pharmacist Support Service in Australia. The competency standards for today's session are listed there, so to resolve problems, collaborate with members of the healthcare team and commit to work in the workplace. So this particular activity has been accredited for 1 hour of Group 1 CPD, suitable for inclusion in an individual pharmacist CPD plan, and the accreditation numbers there. Now, following this, we'll be talking about some resources at the end, or Guna will point to some of those, and we'll be uploading the recording of this session and some of the helpful resources in our eCPD system following the lecture. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Guna, and she can start taking you through her presentation.
Welcome, and it's a delight to be here with Denis. And as indicated, we've had a lot of experience in facilitating stress management workshops, as well as working with people who are feeling stressed. My own experience with the PSS is a long association, and I've been contracted to provide training and support for PSS volunteers. Today is an opportunity to review and reflect, to review your signs of stress and to reflect upon what are the strategies you're currently using and whether in fact you might be able to build on your existing resilience, or do you need to improve it further so that you can cope more effectively with stress in the workplace. I'd like to pass you over to Denis, who is going to talk about the various principles to keep in mind as we're going through this webinar.
This is all about you the person. And the important idea underpinning the principles is who determines what you think? Who determines what you think about? And the answer, of course, is you. And as soon as we look at the principles that are going to be produced in a moment, with a bit of luck, hopefully, yes, and these are 4 principles out of many thousands of possible principles, but these really relate to the management of stress and building resilience. And it certainly relates to how you think and whether you are prepared to TITE, tune into the environment, be aware, That is, be aware of what's happening around you, be aware of what you are thinking and feeling and so on. The second one, MOM, maintain an open mind. And I've met so many people who insist that they are completely open-minded, but when reality strikes, they are probably not. They are locked into what could be described as a comfort zone. But if you can maintain an open mind and be receptive, you have a chance of being able to think about the issues that we'll be introducing you to. The third of four is KSA, keep searching for alternatives. There's always another way of being able to look at something, whether it be something good or something bad. Keep searching for variables, keep searching for alternatives. And then the final one of these purportedly helpful principles, TBV, trust but verify, check the data. Is what Denis is saying correct? I'm prepared to have a go and to think about what it is that he's been talking about. And it's certainly true that I determine what I think about and what I look at. And I can't not think about something. As soon as you're thinking about it, you're thinking about it. And the principles relate. In the next slide, in and in. Oh, we've been slightly provocative here. What does that possibly mean? And why is that last in bold? Well, what it means is Guna and I can only in and in. We can only invite and inspire insight in you. We can't, in fact, tell you what you're going to think. We can invite you to be insightful, and hopefully will, with a few remarkable ideas about how to build resilience. Now for the next bit, here is good.
So, how resilient are you? It's an important question to ask yourself from time to time, and this will be a poll question which we'd like you to respond to. So, do you bounce back quickly after a stressful period at work as a pharmacist? Yes or no? So, what we have with 89% having voted for that question, 59% yes and 41% no. So it's interesting data to look at. One of the things to keep in mind as we proceed in this webinar is that Denis and I work from the assumption that many of you are pretty resilient. And many of you have lots of skills and strategies to be able to cope as a pharmacist within hospitals. But there's always an opportunity to improve. There are times in our lives too when we are less resilient than we are at other times because of personal events, because of other stresses that have occurred within your work. So for the people who are feeling slightly less resilient at the moment, keep in mind that it can be improved, and use this as an opportunity to review and reflect. For those of you who feel that you can bounce back reasonably quickly, again, it's a fine-tuning of how you usually proceed in your role as a pharmacist. Moving on to the next slide. So what we're going to do is focus on how resilient you are. And to do that, we need to consider what emotional resilience actually involves. The definition is very clear that it is about being able to bounce back emotionally and physically after you've been through a difficult and stressful time. And that's particularly pertinent to pharmacy, which is what we call a zero-error profession. It's also about a belief that you can cope and that it's possible to cope in particularly stressful circumstances. It's about believing that you have the capacity to control yourself and what happens in your life. It's being able to effectively manage your stress and having skills and strategies that are well embedded. It's being able to change from a negative mood into a more positive one. And that requires a lot of thinking skills to be able to do that. It's having realistic and attainable expectations of yourself and others, persisting to achieve a desired outcome, the capacity to learn from past mistakes and not to repeat them. To learn from past experiences is a very powerful thing. And it's also about being able to be empathic towards others. So being emotionally resilient has a definite positive impact on your emotional and physical health. It generates more frequent positive moods. It enables your thinking to be more rational and reasonable. As a result of being emotionally resilient, you can have confidence in your strengths and abilities. You'll have a greater capacity to develop caring and supportive relationships at work and make realistic plans and take steps to achieve these. As a result of being emotionally resilient, you're more likely to be able to problem solve and action plan effectively. There'll be greater clarity in your decision making. You're more likely to be able to be cool-headed, particularly when things are stressful. And you'll engage in significantly less blaming. All of these are very helpful for strong and helpful and healthy team dynamics. I'm now going to pass you over to Denis.
This is a very exciting slide because the idea that stress is necessarily evil and bad is not true. And you can see the relationship between performance and stress. The F stands for facilitating stress, so that where you look at the two lows, low performance and low stress, the relationship just gets better and better for a little while as the stress increases. As the stress increases, that's the facilitating stress. And you need some excitement, some stress, some demands in your environment in order to perform. And you can see that the top of the graph there, which is under the heading of medium, but not necessarily true, because it could be either very low stress is the tipping point or very high stress could be the tipping point. But there is always a tipping point. And there, in my diagram, it goes into the D, which is debilitating. And when stress gets to a certain level, the performance starts to drop off again and goes right back to very, very low. As the stress increases, the debilitation increases, and nothing much happens. Your performance goes. But there is a very exciting relationship there. And if you think about it, and if you ponder in your life how that works, then you have both facilitating and debilitating stress, and your performance is accompanying that in all sorts of diffuse ways. Now, how feeling stressed are you at this moment? Are you feeling stressed? Here is Guna.
So are you feeling stressed? Think about stress as a scale from 0 to 10, and mentally or on a piece of paper write down how stressed you're feeling currently, because in a moment we're going to have a look at how you actually show that stress at work. Keeping in mind you might be slightly different at home, but in the workplace stress will be definitely demonstrated in a wide range of ways in terms of your body's reactions, your emotional reactions, the thinking and decision making, and how you relate to others. So what I'd like you to do is to write down one way in which you typically react for each of those questions. So one way that you typically react when you feel stressed in terms of your body, in terms of the emotions you feel when you're feeling very stressed at work, what happens to your thinking and decision making, and how you relate to others? In other words, how does a high level of stress affect the way that you interact with your colleagues at work in a hospital pharmacy, as well as with colleagues within the pharmacy itself? I'll give you a moment to write the first thing that comes to mind, only one thing. It won't be shared, but it's something for you to reflect on. So let's have a think about the various signs of stress. And as we move through it, I want you to actually identify the ones that you typically experience in your work as a hospital pharmacist.
You can see there that fast heartbeat is one, shortness of breath, tense neck muscles, grinding your teeth, or a sore jaw, or a clenched fist. Doesn't have to be just one of them, but it can be some interesting complex of all of them. As we proceed to the next slide, the physical signs of stress continue. Excessive perspiration, my goodness. Being overly alert, hyper alert. Frequent diarrhea or constipation. Skin irritations. There's nothing wrong with me, I just can't stop scratching. Chronic tiredness. Oh, and on this slide, headaches. And for a headache and its association with stress, well, what do? We alleviate it a bit. There's some more. Hot or cold spells, churning stomach, frequent heartburn, muscle spasms, and elevated blood pressure. Physical signs of stress. And if you look at the list and you think about them, do they or do they not, or to what extent do they apply to you?
So let's have a look at the emotional signs of stress. Again, think about yourself. Which of these applies to you when there's a lot of stress in the workplace? Do you feel tense and irritable and or frustrated? Do you feel anxious, nervous, worrying? Do you have angry outbursts when things get very stressful, very tough? Many pharmacists can control that, but sometimes the angry outbursts occur at home or perhaps in the car. Moodiness, noticeable mood changes, and that often occurs when people can suddenly control their signs of stress, but people will observe that they are a bit moody and they change quickly. Moving on to the next slide, feeling down, not necessarily depressed, but often people report to me and to Denis that they feel flat or down, feeling overwhelmed, out of control, and that tendency to want to cry, even though that's often suppressed in the workplace. Behaviourally, and remember that there are different ways of expressing stress. So behavioural signs of stress may be the way that you express it rather than physical or emotional. People who are very professional often have typical ways of expressing stress, but it may not be across all domains. It might be one or two ways that really speak to you. So here it's about feeling pressured by time, restless and running around and rushing around, impatience when things seem too slow, finding it difficult to stand or to sit still, putting everything or everyone down, and being self-critical. Often we can see ourselves becoming more stressed when our language changes, and that's because our self-talk, that, how we process things in our brain has changed, that we start becoming more negative. Perhaps you have an inability to take a break from work. Are you constantly driven to achieve? Another sign that you may be highly stressed is that suddenly you start making more mistakes, and you only may realize it after the fact. Do you have difficulty solving problems? The head's clouded. And it leads to difficulties in thinking clearly. Overall, there's a decreased level of effective activity. Are you able to identify whether you've been snappy towards others? Sometimes we think we're okay, but others see us snappy. Are you unassertive, forgetful? Where did I put those keys? Where did I put that file? Do you have an urge to run away or hide? Now, pharmacists would never tell any other person within their team that this was happening, but there might be that inner thought, if only I could disappear for a second or two. Do you procrastinate? Do you put off things that are very difficult? Do you start being uncooperative? Again, you may not know that until someone tells you so, and you start having some problems in working relationship, or perhaps it's something that you see in others rather than yourself. Sometimes we notice that we're starting to feel very stressed because we suddenly increase our use of caffeine, nicotine or alcohol. For some people, it results in a loss of appetite, but for other people there's overeating or comfort eating, perhaps not at work, but after work. For many people, the behavioural signs of stress will come through in interrupted sleep, which for some will be insomnia. And that's significant because it actually then means that you can't have that rejuvenating sleep. And it'll then lead to a vicious cycle of not being able to function as effectively the next day and increase your stress. The inability to enjoy a good laugh, and when people crack a joke at work, if you're very stressed, it's very, very hard to suddenly find it funny. For some, it'll be seen as increased sick leave where you need to take some time off to recuperate. So what are your sources of stress at work? We're going to briefly look at the sources of stress at work in a hospital or pharmacy, but keep in mind that this can vary from person to person. There have been a few studies, not many, related to it. But each person will have different types of stresses that will trigger a stress response. So Denis and I take you through it, but keeping in mind that each person may have a different source of stress. The first thing I want to draw attention to is that pharmacy is one of those zero-error professions, and I alluded to that at the beginning of this webinar. That in itself increases the level of stress. And I'm well aware that pharmacy has lots of systems-based approaches to manage error, and that's important. But the very fact that it's zero error means that there will always be an alertness. People will be alert to error in whatever they're doing, and that is a source of ongoing stress which needs to be managed. There is some research suggesting that feeling undermined or not being valued as an experienced professional may be contributing to a source of stress. Unhelpful team dynamics, working in an interdisciplinary team in which members have different expectations. This also can be a source of possible stress. Conflicts with others at work can use up a lot of energy, but it's a source of stress and distress for many people, and it uses up a lot of energy, a lot of headspace, and it actually decreases the possibility of being able to concentrate on work, and that then becomes a risk when it's a zero-error environment. Sometimes there are professionals in a hospital, other professionals who you're dealing with, who may be perceived as difficult. And we put it in inverted commas because it can vary, but there are difficulties in the interaction, perhaps because of their approach, perhaps because they're stressed. Being on call for 24 hours a day for extended periods of time during the workday or on weekends, perhaps for a longer period of time, can also increase your stress. And then we come to life and death. And anyone who deals with patients and family members where there's life and death is more likely to feel distressed and stressed, even though you may manage it in the workplace. These are what we call the heavier issues in life. But many of you may be dealing with angry or aggressive patients or family members and dealing with critical incidents that happen within hospitals. And if there's no systematic debriefing, that can also increase your level of distress. Working within a hierarchical organisational structure of a hospital can in itself create some stress because there is red tape, there are ways and processes of doing things. In working for a long time with pharmacists, I've noticed that there are times that pharmacists don't have time for tea breaks or lunch breaks, and that in itself creates significant problems. And for a number of pharmacists, they feel compelled to complete their paperwork at the end of the day because there simply hasn't been enough time to do it during the working day, which is something as part of your professional life, but it can also be a burden. Let me now introduce you to your hospital brain. This is a brain that was developed by the University of Bath in a research project. We've adapted it. Kay Dunkley from the Pharmacist Support Service has adapted the hospital pharmacy brain, which was developed by Hannah family as part of a research project in 2012. But it's often useful to sit down, and I invite you to do that when you have a spare moment, to map out your own brain. What's going on in your brain at any one point? Perhaps many of these things that you see in the hospital brain is what you're carrying. Now, it's not meant to be an accurate depiction of your brain, but it's simply an indicator that we're often carrying a phenomenal amount of stuff, from medication reconciliations, needing an interpreter, arranging dispensary cover roster, 5 new admissions, doctor not answering your page, nurse education session and the webinar, phone, mum, as well as perhaps there are lots of other things that you need to do for the family. We haven't even included that in your brain. Authority scripts, journal clubs, CPD points. While there's no time today to map out your brain, but it's an interesting exercise to do at any point. And if you're in a group, perhaps it's a little exercise to do during another lunch break. And if you're seeing this webinar on your own, please try it. It's a very interesting exercise to do on a regular basis. What's in my brain? So as I said, we acknowledge the work that's been done by Hannah family as part of research in 2012. There is a link which we'll put together at the end of the webinar, which you'll be able to see. I'm now going to pass you over to Denis.
Otherwise known as a triquetra, integrates your thoughts, your feelings and your actions, the 3 parts that can contribute to an amazing amount of stress or to a decision not to be stressed. As we move into the next section, which concerns the extent to which your bits are in balance, you can see from the drawing on that slide that things are not really in balance.
Let's go back to the last slide for a moment and reflect on the role of your head, your heart, and your hands. In other words, the interaction between your thoughts and your feelings, and then how it affects your actions. If your thinking happens to be very negative, for instance, you're more likely to feel stress. So we know that if we're feeling stress, we need to have a look at what's going on in our heads and how we're processing things, how we're thinking about things, because that's then going to have an effect on how we react and what actions we take. One of the interesting things that Denis and I are very much aware of, and which you are probably as well, is that when you become stressed, your choice of options is quite limited. You actually become like those old-fashioned dray horses, where you put the blinkers on and you charge through with, say, one or two options, if maybe only one, because you're so focused on achieving. But in fact, what you haven't realized is that, and you can't see in that moment, all the things that you haven't done. So that's why it's dangerous in zero-error professions to be too stressed. Remember what Denis said previously, you need some stress that's facilitating, but you'll get to the tipping point where if there's too much stress, then you run risks. So are your bits in balance? Interesting question for you to think about. Are the scales balanced or are they tipping? So let's have a look at strategies to manage your stress. Keeping in mind, you already have probably a whole range of strategies that are working for you. Keep those going, please. But as we move through the different strategies to manage stress, particularly as we look at building resilience, you'll see that there'll be many that you can actually put a tick next to. Yes, I'm doing that. But there'll be others that you need to be mindful of and make a note for yourself that this is something I need to undertake as part of my ongoing professional development, which you'll do at home or perhaps at work in a group. Firstly, be aware. Tune into the environment, your environment. Be aware of how you react in stressful situations. In other words, it's about mindfulness. Remember how we talked about your thinking? Identify and challenge your negative thinking, the self-talk and perceptions. Which of your thoughts are unhelpful? And if you believe it's unhelpful, examine the evidence, and that then helps you unlock it. Because in fact, your initial reaction upon reflection may not be tenable, and you may wish to change the way you think about a particular situation. Maybe it's been unnecessarily negative. Doesn't mean to say that your thinking can't have some negative thoughts. That's perfectly reasonable. But it's whether you have unhelpful, unreasonable thoughts about your perceptions of the world, your work as a pharmacist, your interactions with others, your work, a whole range of things. We are constantly processing. I always say we're like we have a brain that's like an IT center. It's far more sophisticated than anything we'll ever experience. So important to develop healthy lifestyle habits. And this is part of physical resilience. Healthy meals, So if you're missing out on meals and eating on the run, think about that, please. Sleep. If you compromise quality sleep, it'll come through as high levels of stress. Please limit your alcohol, as you all know, it has some significant side effects. No smoking, and exercise. Absolutely important to do some form of exercise that is appropriate to your physical requirements. And if in doubt, please see your GP. Increase your physical fitness by exercising on a regular basis. It may not be skipping, it may be walking, it might be lifting weights, it might be going to the gym, it might be ballroom dancing. There are different ways of exercising on a regular basis. High self-esteem is also implicated in terms of having lower stress. People who feel equal to others and who have high self-esteem can often manage stress far more effectively. Dennis, would you like to say a word about self-esteem, please?
A belief in oneself, a feeling of equality with other people, and a particular interest in principles. Very important. And how your communication skills impact on others, very important also. But personal power, a summary of where we're up to on the next slide, as you will see. Here is a decision. You are in charge of your thinking, you are in charge of your decision making, and you can decide whether you're going to take action or not take action. Left-hand side there. Will I take action or will I not take action on this particular issue? But wait a minute, can you control it? Or from your perspective, can I control it? Or can I not control it? And the idea of taking action on things you can control leads to, as you can see in the table there, mastery. Highly desirable, deserves a very big tick. Perhaps giving up does too, so that if you take no action on things you can control because you've decided that it's not appropriate or you're not interested in it or whatever, that's okay. But if you can't control something, ceaseless striving and letting go are the outcomes. These are summarised in the next couple of slides. Mastery, there it is. Taking action on things you can control, taking action on things you wish to achieve, taking action on being positive, on thinking about what you are thinking about. Ceaseless striving, trying to affect the things beyond your control. Feels like you're spinning your wheels and there isn't a sense of accomplishment. That is, taking action on things you cannot control. Ceaseless striving. Don't do it. Next one, giving up. That is choosing to take no action on something you can control. Associated with feeling and acting helpless and feeling a little bit like a victim. And letting go, not trying to influence those things beyond your control. You don't feel guilty or resentful. There's a physical feeling of relief and release when you let go. Very desirable, letting go. Additional strategies to manage stress. Goodness me, are there more?
It's so important to foster supportive relationships with your colleagues at work and within the pharmacy profession. It's important to have a professional and personal support network, trusted people who you can talk with when you're stressed and who will give you constructive feedback. This is where the Pharmacist Support Service could be very helpful if you need someone to talk with. And I'll talk about the PSS later in this webinar. Setting achievable goals is also critical to managing your stress. And we all know that the SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time framed. SMART goals, achievable goals, give you a sense of accomplishment, but it also means it's a wonderful way of managing your stress levels. It relates to managing your time effectively, including priority lists, and the brain responds to it beautifully. Please foster job satisfaction. Those of you who have see pharmacy as interesting and meaningful work are more likely to experience job satisfaction, and that's what we call a kind of a buffer. It's an inoculator to job stress. Have meaningful interactions with others, and that sense of making a difference also tends to help you manage stress. It basically adds a capacity to be able to manage difficult times. Integrate those relaxation techniques into your life. The controlled breathing, you know, where you breathe in through your diaphragm into your chest, hold it, and then out through the mouth. So breathing in through the nose and out. Progressive muscle relaxation, meditation, yoga, and mindfulness. And there are numerous apps for these, but as with all of them, and I find it somewhat amusing that with the phone apps or the iPad apps, it says, please don't use when driving. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, has played a very important role in terms of building resilience, particularly since he introduced the notion of learnt optimism. And basically, it means that you can learn to interpret setbacks as being temporary, local, and able to be changed. And I invite you to read his work on learnt optimism and a later book called Flourish. The PERMA model is also an important model for you to take on board because it's presented by Seligman in his book Flourish in 2011, and it provides building blocks for resilience. PERMA is an acronym which stands for 5 essential elements that need to be in place for you to experience well-being, but it also plays a very important role in building resilience. The P stands for positive emotion, peace, gratitude, joy, satisfaction, pleasure, inspiration, hope, curiosity, and love. Engagement, the E, stands for an experience that you have if you truly engage in a situation, task, or project. So if you're truly engaged in your work, you literally experience a state of flow. It's when time seems to stop and you lose your sense of self and you concentrate intensely on the present. You can actually experience this in your private life, in hobbies that you might have, or perhaps you enjoy ballroom dancing, or it can be even walking in the fresh air. But it's being in that moment, and that is so healing and so replenishing. R stands for positive relationships, and we've already talked about the need to have very close and effective relationships at work. These are the meaningful positive relationships fundamental to our well-being at work but also outside of work. Developing a mentor relationship with someone, or having someone who you trust as a professional who you can debrief with, is absolutely critical. Develop meaning in your life, that's the M, and that sense of achievement or accomplishment when you master a skill, achieve a goal or outcome. So at the end of the working day, it's often very useful to say to yourself, what did I achieve? What did I accomplish? Because it actually is very good in terms of our mental well-being and our capacity to cope with stress. The Pharmacist Support Service. Let me say a few words about the role that the PSS plays, because it's available to all Australian pharmacists, interns and pharmacy students. The PSS service is free and it provides a listening ear as well as support and information. It is a service that's provided by volunteers and they're pharmacists and they're trained. And they're trained specifically for members of the pharmacy profession. If you call the service, your call will remain anonymous. And the call is confidential unless you're at risk or if someone else is at risk of harm. It's available every day of the week, 365 days a year, from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And many people phone the PSS to debrief critical incidents, or if they've got an issue within the pharmacy, or if there's no one else that they can talk with, or if they need to be able to work through an issue that's affecting their life in private. And sometimes it's of a personal nature. It doesn't necessarily need to be about your work in the pharmacy within the hospital. So we have put up on the webinar, and we will after the webinar's finished, a number of helpful resources. And while you may not have time to write them down now, they will be posted. But it refers to Seligman's work. Please have a look at all the phone apps. Both of them are useful books. There's also 2 articles, Muir and Bortoletto, Burnout Among Hospital Pharmacists in the Journal of Pharmacy Practice and Research, as well as Wikanzani's article, Stress in Pharmacy.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Guna and Denis very much for coming in to do this webinar today. So I've enjoyed listening to the content as well. All right then, so if there are no questions, then we'll conclude the webinar now.